Well, today is do or die day. It's time to put the cylinder head back on this thing. And the reason why I say it's do or die day is because I'm doing the bare minimum on this to do a compression check to verify that the compression will be okay to continue on with assembling this thing. Ultimately, in the end, even if the compression was not good and something else was a problem, I would still be ultimately putting this thing back together, because if the compression on it is bad and it won't run, then there's no point in going any further. But to have it fully assembled means then if we sell the vehicle that somebody will be more interested in buying it. But I'm fairly optimistic in that this will be good. Everything's been cleaned up. All the surfaces are cleaned up. Threw a little bit of WD-40 into the cylinder walls just to give them a little lubrication, because with the overheating and coolant possibly going into the cylinder walls, I wanted to give that a good chance. Cylinder head got all cleaned and machined, so it looks good. It's cleaned all up nice. Got a compression tester, got the head bolts. Head gasket, as you can see, is already on, so that's good. Got all the RTV and everything cleaned off all down in there. We got all the parts laid out over here. Looks like a bit of a mess, but I know where everything is. Timing cover is underneath there. It's all cleaned off. So, I mean, right now we're just kind of at the assembly stage. So, I printed off the instructions of how to do a few things. So like the instructions here of how to do the cam caps, and this here is instructions on how to do the install for the head bolts. This car does have a very specific head bolt install procedure, which is highly advisable to pay attention to. I don't know if it was done properly the last time I did this, or the last time whoever was in this did it. So I can't say for sure, and I can't say if not. So all I can do is go through this myself and, you know, make sure everything is done the way that either the manual says or as good to my ability as I can, and then just hope and pray from there. So figure I'll get you set up on the tripod, and we'll get the cylinder head installed and just keep plugging away from there. So head gasket is in, we got our dowel pins in, so now it's just a matter of putting the cylinder head on. As long as everything lines up, this shouldn't be a problem. Except we're not lining up. So this top one here is going in without a problem, but this back corner one here does not want to sit down all the way. Just trying to find my rubber mallet. All right, that's installed. So one of the things in the instruction manual, as with a lot of these, is it asks that when you're doing the head bolts, clean mating surface. So it says up here, apply engine oil to cylinder head bolts and tighten them gradually as follows. So a lot of head bolts, especially on the one-time use type ones, you will find that it asks for that. And then also all I do is just coat the head, the washer, and it just makes it so that it's got more slipperiness. So I'm just gonna go along, I'm gonna get oil in all the head bolts and get them sort of started. So all the head bolts are in. So now I'm just gonna run them down with the impact, just down to they're just touching. No tension, just touching to help alleviate me having to wrench them all down. So they are now all tight. So now we're going to start doing our torque sequence. I prefer to not use extensions when doing torquing, but they are down there too deep that I simply cannot get at them. Oh, I missed a lower one in there. So, as per the instructions, and with most cylinder heads, they will always have a general torque sequence. Usually it's from like center out, and this one is no different. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And when you do that, they ask that the first round is set to 38 foot-pounds, which isn't a lot. Okay, so now we're at 38 on the torque wrench. So now we follow the sequence. So middle, and 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. See how far down I'm ratcheting this one. Because either I didn't get this one all the way down, or the head's lifted up in this corner that much already. Nine, and then 10. All right. So now that the first set is done, it says in the same manner, we go to 59.5 and do it all over again. And a half there. So now we do the same thing all over again. So one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, when you've done all that, it has a loosen. It'll say loosen them all again until it's reduced to 0 and in a very specific pattern. So we take all the tension off our torque wrench. And we follow the sequence. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's our initial. set and undo. And now we follow it again. And again, you'll see it wants us to tighten it again in a similar pattern, in accordance to the pattern, in accordance to this. But you'll notice it's 38 to 74.5, where previously it was 38 to 59.5. So it's the same initial, but the torque is different on the final. So back to 38. All right, so there's 38. And now we follow the pattern again. So one is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now we go to 74.5. Okay, so now back to 1. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then the funny thing about this is that, and this tripped me up when I was taking this apart, is that right down in here, right there, is a little bolt. All I can imagine that is for is basically, it's like a little locating bolt, pin, dowel, I'm not sure. And I remember when I was trying to take this thing apart, that that was down there, and it tripped me up because I couldn't figure out why this head wouldn't come off. Now you don't have to torque this one down a lot, it's only at like 8 foot-pounds, so you can just basically tighten this one by hand. That is all there is to putting the head back on after all the work has been done. So now what we have is to do the top half, camshafts, caps, shims, buckets, and then once that's on, then we can work on the timing. So I'm gonna get everything gathered up, take a second, get everything gathered, and then we'll get back at it. Where we left off, cylinder head's installed, and we followed the service manual as we should. So if anything goes wrong after this, either I'm completely an idiot or there is something worse wrong on this, but let's hope that neither of those are true and this goes on without a hitch. Now we have to do the install of the cam and all the upper stuff, fill in that void. To do that, we have all our cam caps and our bolts here, and then over here we have all the bags for our shims and buckets for the exhaust on this side and the intake on this side. And unfortunately, it slipped my mind, and I should have, and I meant to pick up some assembly lube, but I derped out and completely forgot, because since everything has been cleaned, you know, you want at least something in there so that when we do the startup, that we have something to lubricate it. So some people say 30 weight oil, some people say an oil treatment. For me, I have this oil treatment. It's basically an engine braking oil additive. So it's super thick, super gooey, and I'm going to use that as a start for this. Because of all the work and everything that has happened on this, the one thing I do plan on doing is, if everything is good on this thing and everything gets up and running, I will be doing an immediate oil change, just because of all the stuff that's happened, machining, different cylinder head, all the sanding and cleaning and everything like that. So it's generally good to do a fresh oil change once you've gotten to that point, and then that way, you know, it's going to be a little bit expensive because you're buying 2 oil filters and doing an oil change pretty quick, but peace of mind says it'll be better for you in the end. So back on the tripod you'll go, and we'll continue with this and get this all going. So we're going to start with the exhaust side. So I label it E1. I was unaware at the time that this end is a cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I was labeling these bags, I did it apparently in proper order. So just take some of our goop here. Just squirt some of this over each of the top of the valves. There. Now we can go ahead. But what I did was, you'll notice it says E1, so exhaust 1. But then what I did is E1 right, E1 left, so that when these go back in, I know specifically what spot they were in. Buckets can only go in one way. Now, they have a brass thing on the top of the bucket, brass thing here on the bottom. So they just go together. And we just move across. Put some gloves on. I have my hands in a lot of oil. I do have a pretty good soap for cleaning afterwards, but the less that I gotta deal with, the better. Oops, too far over. Need my magnet. You know, one of the things that I find funny, these little magnets, they are sure handy for everything. They're also very brittle. I don't know when I did it, but I cracked that magnet in there, so I gotta buy a new one. Well, that wasn't very smart of me. I forgot to write left on that one. Must have got distracted someday. All right, so exhaust side is done. Just gonna throw a little bit of goop on top of these. Smear that around a little bit. Now I'm not using a lot because I don't have the oil pan on this thing. So any large amount of oil that I put on the top end will just pour out the bottom end. Now we'll do the intake. Now unfortunately I wish I could use more parts off the old cylinder head, because the old cylinder head, for the shape and what everything that had happened to this thing, was actually in really good shape. So I don't know if it was because it had been recently cleaned or because it was just a new head or rebuilt or something, but it was kind of crazy to see the difference in the cleanliness of this cylinder head that I had to get replaced versus the other one. The other one is in much cleaner and much better shape, but I'm good with having a cylinder head that should be all right to use. Don't drop that on the floor. All right, there's all the shims and buckets in, a little bit of goop. Smear that around. Ooh, got a lot on that one, that's all right. One of the things about this is that the camshafts from the old head were much better shape. So we're gonna put that onto this head and not use the ones that we bought from the junkyard. When you're putting these on, you want to make sure that you're putting the intake and the exhaust on the right ones. The intake one, or the intake one, has on this end these little grooves and these little bumps. That goes in sync with the sensor that's on your valve cover. So we're just going to lube this up a little bit. Okay, so now we put the caps on. What's funny about these caps is if you ever get confused, if you look at it, it does actually say or tell you kind of where they go. So this one here says I2, which means intake second position. And this one says E2, so exhaust second. And then all the way across the same thing. So you got 3. I think what I'm going to do before I put all these on, I'm going to put just a hair, just a little bit of oil on the bottom side of this. I know I looped up the camshaft, but we're going to just put some of the goop in there. Hate dropping crap on the floor. Got some over spillage on the outside. That off so it doesn't leak down the block. This one is 5, so it goes on the end. This one's 3. Where's it 4? Exhaust 4. There we go. All right, so there's all the exhaust ones, I mean. And now we're going to put exhaust ones on. And I keep getting my brain scrambled today. Just put the exhaust ones on. Now we're putting the intake ones on. So 4, 3, 5. Now, if you're wondering why it's 2, 3, 4, 5, because this constitutes as your number 1. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now there is a right way and a wrong way to put these on. So if you look at your valve cover, you will notice that certain ones will come up out of the valve cover. So you can see like these ones here. Yeah, so this one, this one, this one, this one come up out of the valve cover so that you can screw it down. And then the other two are these two on the front. So if we look, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think it's that one and this one, I think. Nope, that's wrong. Am I wrong? Man, I don't know. It looks like I should have 4. But I only have... Oh no, I do have 4. Hold on. I have 3. Should have 4. Okay. I do have 4. 2 more on the table. But now I gotta realign this to make sure I'm putting them in the right spots. So if we put this down there, I need it on this one. This one, and on this one, and on that one. Now off the old head, they were pretty dirty, so I was cleaning them, but I'm not overly concerned right now, so we'll just stick that in the hole. Now, these bolts are very easy to strip and break. They only require like 8 foot-pounds of torque, which is very minimal. But the reason why you gotta be careful putting these bolts and snugging these ones down for, and why you will want to use a very small fastener, like use a 1/4-inch drive on these, is because you have to make sure that when you're tightening these, you're actually in fact pushing down pressure onto the shims and the shim buckets. So as you're tightening them, you're actually doing it under tension, and that can give you grief and cause you problems. Okay, so I'm gonna get my 1/4-inch drive. These are all 10 mils. Now, there is a tightening sequence, so if you want to pay attention to that, you can. I would suggest that you do. Like I said, they only have to go down to 8 foot-pounds, so it's not a lot. Yeah, and you just keep following the instructions, keep going all around. So I'll finish doing this, getting this all snug down, and then we'll come back. Okay, so got the camshafts, everything back all installed as it should be. Normally, I would like to take you guys along and show you guys how things are done, such as now that I have these in, I now have to install the timing components. Being that this is a 2-chain timing component setup and I've never done this and it's going to be very tedious and very specific, I am just going to focus on getting this done and getting it done properly so that I know it's done right and not give me any grief. I've never done this before, so this is completely new to me. You give me a small block Chevy, not a problem. You give me a dual chain like this, it's a little bit different. Honda's timing belts, not a problem. This is different. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things being very specific. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bang off this whole timing chain stuff. Once it's all done, I've confirmed everything is good and nothing binds or breaks or anything like that, then I'm going to do a compression test on this. So next time you see me, it will be all back together for the most part, and I will be doing a compression test. So I will see you in a little bit. So I got the first timing chain installed. Wasn't actually as difficult as I thought it was going to be. It's more confusing than really difficult. I found a really good picture that kind of really helped explain it a lot. So this is the picture here. And the way it explains it well is at the top here on the first timing chain is a blue link. And then if you look at the bottom, there's a gold link. So all you got to do is make sure where your key is on your crankshaft, it's pointed up, straight up and down. And then on here, you can see the little circle right here. That's the mark to align. And then you can see that these two links are just slightly, like the split is down the center. And if we come over to the car, and you look on the bottom side, the gold chain is right here, but it's really kind of tough to notice the difference in the light, but that's the gold chain. And then you can see the key is lined up to the dot or to the slash up there on the top. So your slash is on the top, there's your key, there's your mark on the bottom, and your gold chain. So those are all in line. And then up here, it's a little tough to see. But the blue link is right in here. There's the dot, and there is the split. And right now, that dot is under the blue link. And if you come back over here and you look, you can see that the dot is under the blue link. So timing chain 1 is properly installed. Now, where it gets difficult is we gotta do timing chain 2. And timing chain 2 has the sprocket on the bottom plus 2 on the top. But what makes it more difficult is that both of these camshafts have to be at a very specific place. And then you got to figure out a way to get all of this down in here all in sync. So that's what I'm working on now. I will use this chart again. So you can see that the blue link for the upper chain is in line with this arrow. And then you can see there's one dark chain link there, one dark chain link there. And if we come over to the other chain, or the second chain if you will, and you look at it, you'll see there's a dark link. Kind of hard to really see these links because of what the lighting is like in here. But so there's that one. So this one is really easy to see because it's bright yellow. But there's a dark blue one right there, another dark blue one right there. So I'm going to be working on getting that all lined up and getting the second chain installed, and then we'll see what happens from there. So as someone who will openly admit to their mistakes, but this is a case of not 100% knowing what I'm doing and figuring stuff out kind of as I go along. If you notice, So if you notice, the caps are off. And the reason the caps are off for is because apparently the proper way to do this is install your first timing chain. And then once you have that installed, then you want to do your camshafts, because what I found was your camshafts can be out a certain amount. And when they're out, you can't turn them all the way around because then they will hit the pistons. So what was happening was I would turn it one way, it would stop and not go further. Turn it the other way, it would stop and not go further. After going through the instructions again, I noticed that it said install timing chain 1, then install the camshafts. So that's where I'm at now. And if you look at the picture that I have here, you can see that the arrow is pointing this way. And if you look at the camshaft, the arrow is now pointing the same direction. There's also a little, it's really kind of tough to see, but there's this little tiny piece right at the end of my finger here. That's basically the lineup mark for this camshaft. So that one is now set up properly. So now I got to do this one. And then once I have that set up, I can put the second chain on and then continue forward. So I just thought I'd show you guys that in case you were working on this and wondering why you can't rotate your camshafts after they've been installed, because they're whacking the pistons. So stop and take a look at the instructions if that's the case, and then move forward from there. Man, let me tell you, doing this second chain, what a pain in the butt. So I already spun it over a couple of times to make sure everything was clear and free. So what basically happens is a couple of things here. So first off, on your idler sprocket here, where the arrow is on the face side, on the tooth it's pointed to, mark it. Because when you're doing it from here, you can look down and then see where that tooth is, so you can get that yellow link on the tooth. And then what I did was you get this sprocket and bolt in, you get this chain going around and down the bottom, and then what will happen is you'll just have to make the cam spin just a hair this way, and then it'll let you get this sprocket on over here. So it took me a little bit longer than I wanted to get this all to this point, and I was kind of hoping this evening I was going to be able to get this compression test done on this. But you know, when you're working on stuff like this and it's the first time doing something like this and you're unfamiliar with it, sometimes you have to double back and, you know, go through things a couple of times. And unfortunately, that's what I had to do. I mean, I had to pull the cams out again to get those to line up. I had to take the upper tensioner off a couple of times because I accidentally, without needing to remove it, pulled this off, which is the stud for that. So I put that in backwards. So there was a few little things that caused me to be delayed and take a little bit longer than what I wanted for this, but she is back together right now. So I'm going to sign off for this evening. Everything that I can think of is done. And at this point, basically, probably tomorrow evening, I'll be back out, do a compression check and see where it's at. Just cranking over the chain, just cranking it, just hand cycling the chains. Sounds like there's good compression, so I am still very, very hopeful. Out of those 4 holes, there's 3 spark plugs in it and 1 is out. So I mean, that was definitely a challenge to turn over for compression. So it was not easy to turn for compression, and if I had all 4 in there, it'd probably even be more difficult. So this evening I am done. I will be back out here tomorrow and we will do a compression check. All right, well, it's the next day and we are getting to be at that point where battery's installed, compression tester's installed. I've got the motor relatively stable. What I plan on doing is, the battery's pretty weak, so I'm going to throw the battery charger on it for a few minutes. Once that's juiced up, I'll put on the start mode, and then I will get my helper out here and they will crank the engine over and hopefully we'll see some good numbers on these compressions tests. So just a few more things to go, and we should see what's going to happen here in a few moments. Okay, so we are going to go for round one. Got the battery charger on. Got my helper here. I don't know if this battery is going to have enough juice. Battery charger is only showing 5 on the counter, but we'll see what happens. So we're going to kick it over to engine start. Okay, turn it over, dear. Yep. Just keep going. Well, I guess that answers if we have enough juice or not. So we'll have to let this keep charging. We'll be back later. All right. So tried a compression test a couple of times. Unfortunately, the battery just wasn't up to it. So I had to put the charger on it, let it sit overnight, and we're back out in the shop. So we're gonna test this again and see how many revs we can get out of this battery before it dies, or I have to charge it again. So gonna go ahead here. We're on cylinder number 1 again, and we're gonna watch the compression as she cranks it over. Go ahead. Okay, so yeah, we're showing some good numbers here. Looks to be about 160-ish. So we'll go to the next hole. Okay, so now we're in hole number 2, and we're gonna watch it get cranked, so go ahead. Okay. Okay, so we hit 160 on that one as well. Okay, now we're in hole number 3, and we're gonna watch as she cranks it over, so go ahead. Okay, so we're a little low on that one, just under 150, so I wish that was a little bit higher than that, but I mean, can't really say how much juice is left in this battery, but we're still within the realm that I'm good with. So we'll move on to the next one here in a second. Now we're in hole number 4, and we'll watch as she cranks it over, so go ahead. Okay. And well, we are well past 160 on that one, so we're gonna just do number 3 one more time here, just to make sure I had it seated properly and see where we're at. So we'll just do that in a second. Okay, so we're back in hole 3, so we'll watch it again. Go ahead. Okay, so we can get up to about 150 on that one. So I don't know what the shape of this head is in. It is a used head, so we were told when we had it at the machine shop that you know, there was a bit of leak down on the valves. So what we'll probably do is put it back together, because we know the compression is good. So we'll get it back together, and then we'll just run it good and hot for a bit, get it through some cycles, and see where the compression is afterwards. This engine did have a lot of this cylinder did have a lot of carbon buildup in the exhaust valves as well as the bottoms of it. So it could just be that there's some carbon buildup or stuff like that in the system. So running some fresh oil in it, getting it some heat in it and stuff like that should help break that up. So at this point, I'm good with the compression test. The numbers are good. Generally, you want them within about 10% of each other. So, you know, 3 is at 150, 4 was at, you know, 165-ish, and the other 2 were at 160. So, you know, 3 is down a little bit, but nothing that I'm going to be overly concerned about. Spec in the book says 160 or 166 for standard compression, and 150 for bare minimum. So 3 out of the 4 are well above what they recommend as a minimum. So where as it is, we'll call it good. We'll order the rest of the parts for this thing to get this thing put back together, and then hopefully in a few days we can continue on. we were doing this in sort of a multi-stage means. Basically, we left it at this point where it was the bare minimum to get this thing checked over to make sure the compression was good because everything had happened to it. I'm good with it. Now we can go on to stage 2, order the rest of the minor parts that we need for this, and finish the build. So next time you see me, it'll probably be all back together and probably running. I don't really think I'm going to film much more after this, just because most of the stuff is just literally buttoning up, oil pan, timing cover, that sort of stuff. So it's just tedious, boring stuff. So yeah, a couple of days for me, it'll be a moment for you guys, and we'll see how the rest of this goes. So we'll see you then. When I make a video, I intend to finish a video. And when I intend to finish a video, I intend to sort of show you the outcome of that video so that you can see what's happened or what I have done in that video. When I started taking on the project for the overheating issue, I wasn't expecting it to take almost 3 months to resolve the issue with it. Granted, I've never worked on a vehicle like this before. I've done the scope of work before, but when it's something completely new, you have to learn a whole bunch of things all over again. And I created a video that went and talked about how we initially had a small problem with the vehicle, and that small problem we thought was just a water pump and a thermostat, which I replaced. About a week later, the vehicle was being driven and it catastrophically overheated. And when it overheated, it left my girlfriend stranded on the side of the road. And you know, whatever, that's fine. I can deal with that stuff. But it was everything afterwards that sort of caused a lot of delays and a lot of problems. And I kind of went through and sort of made some notes to kind of give a story and a timeline of the events that kind of unfolded with this. So June 19th is when we had the initial slight overheat of the vehicle, and that's why we changed the water pump and thermostat. And as I always say, you know, after you do a job like that, you know, you got to keep an eye on the vehicle. Make sure you've got no leaks, make sure everything's sealed, coolant's good, you know, watch your thermostat, do all that, and make sure everything's fine. And initially, we thought everything was all right. So June 19th, the car slightly overheated. June 20th is when we ordered the water pump, the thermostat, the rad cap. And then that weekend, the 24th and 25th, we installed those parts. And that's the video that I had made on that. June 26th, so a day later, the car basically catastrophically failed, left her stranded on the side of the highway, and that was, I think, around 4:30 p.m. on the 26th of June. And I have to say, luckily, we found a really good tow truck driver, because my girlfriend actually listens a lot to what I say. And one of the things she did is when she pulled the car over off the side of the highway, she pulled it so that the vehicle was parked straight and perpendicular, so that when the tow truck driver pulled up, he was able to just back straight up to the car. We loaded it right on, and within minutes we were gone. Luckily, where I live, the access to my garage is through an alley, and the alley is extremely wide. So they brought the vehicle with a rollback, and with the width of my alley and that truck, we were actually able to roll the car off and into my shop to make the process a whole lot easier to do everything. Between June 26th and July 22nd, so you can see like almost a month has gone by. Granted, I didn't really focus a lot of time on in there because we had a lot of other stuff going on. So it was just under a month before I started tearing the whole thing down. And then by July 22nd, we had the cylinder head off the car, and at the first machine shop, I took it down on a Saturday. They told me to be done in a couple of days, so I picked it up, I think Monday, Tuesday the following week, and they basically told me that take it home, do a valve job on it yourself, and it should be fine. I didn't like the way I felt when I walked out of that shop. I didn't feel like they were there necessarily to have my business, so I started looking around to find another shop, and I found another shop local or near me, and by August 1st, they had told me that the cylinder head was junk. All the valves leaked. They couldn't do a none of them would hold vacuum. They also told me that the cylinder head was so warped that it was just not salvageable. So the funny thing about this car being a Suzuki is that Suzuki is no longer being manufactured, and trying to find this particular vehicle for parts is also a challenge. So when we were told that the cylinder head was garbage, we knew that we had to find another one. And so we started shopping around, and we found a local junkyard that had one. And so on August 1st is when we were told by the second shop that it was junk. We got lucky that weekend on August 5th, we were able to get to the junkyard to pull a head. Again, when you're pulling a head from a junkyard, you have no idea what you're going to get, especially on these little 4-cylinder cars with aluminum heads. You're taking a gamble. So took that head back to the second shop that we went to, because when I went to that second shop, they really took a lot of notes. They really listened to everything I said, what had happened, what had gone on. So I felt really sure that we're going to have good service there, and we did. So we took the second head back, and by August 10th, the work had been completed. They said that, you know, all the valves were good. All the valves were good except I think one. They said it wasn't horrible, but it should be fine. And so they did that. They surfaced the head, brought it home. And then the following week on the 13th is when we started ordering the first round of parts. And for that, what we decided we wanted to do, because it had such a catastrophic failure, is we were going to order the bare minimum to get the vehicle up and running. So things like the head bolts, the head gaskets, and other small things like that. And so we got that coming through. And you have to understand that up here in Canada, we pay a premium for a lot of our auto parts. So sometimes you can buy stuff locally and the price is fair, but other times for us, Rock Auto is probably the go-to place for good pricing, even after shipping. The downside is that you have to usually wait 3 to 4 days or longer for stuff to come. So if you're in a rush, you get kind of behind everything by a week. So we had put those parts, we had ordered that, got them in, and by August 13th, I had everything back together to a point that I could do a compression check. And as you will see in the footage, we were well above what we wanted to be. We were well above the minimum requirements in the service manual. I think if I remember correctly, we're at like 160, 170 for every cylinder except 3, which was at like 150-ish, somewhere in there. So we were happy and we were glad. So we decided, okay, everything is good. So we are now going to start with the second round of parts, which was basically anything and everything to assemble, you know, the motor, everything, get it back to where the car would be happy so that we could get running it. So August 23rd, we started getting the second round of parts. By September 2nd, we started doing the full rebuild. By this time, I was really gunning to get this thing done. It was in my shop now for almost 3 months, and I was getting to a point where I wanted it out and I wanted it done. So September 2nd was basically full on, full bore. Let's get this thing going. Let's get this thing happening. Let's get this thing moving. So between September 2nd and September 7th was basically putting it back together. September 7th was the initial start. So that was I think it was a Thursday or Friday, I don't remember exactly, but we initially started it idled really, really rough. The engine was very shaky. Now it was weird because at idle it would barely run, but if you got it past idle over 1,000, it would run okay. So I knew something wasn't right, so I started doing some reading, and it really sounded like the timing was off in the vehicles. So unfortunately, on September 9th, I got some more supplies, including a little 4x6 camping mirror, which allowed me to check the timing on this. And in fact, we were off a tooth. There's a diagram out there that basically says when you have everything lined up, you can count the teeth on one side, and there should be like 23 teeth, and we were at 24. So we knew our teeth were off, so I knew the timing was off. So we did the timing on that, got everything back up and running on the 10th, and the 9th. We retimed it and it was running perfect, so we're like, great. So we just let it run for a bit, get it up to temperature, make sure coolant and everything was flowing, there was no leaks, shut the car off. And then on the 10th, which was Saturday, again, we got to run the car, got it up to temp, checked for leaks, didn't see anything, everything was good. Took it off the jack stands, put it on the ground. It was about 1:30 in the afternoon on the 10th. And I said, I told my girlfriend, okay, let's start this thing one more time. And once it gets running, then we'll go for a test drive and go from there. Unfortunately, this was kind of where a catastrophic failure to some degree happened. When I was in such a rush to get everything put back together, I unfortunately forgot to torque down the bolt for the cam sprocket on the intake side. And what happened is through the cycles, it backed out, and it backed out enough that it pushed the head of the bolt, and it couldn't go any further because it hit the engine mount brace. But in doing that, it not only cracked the timing cover, but it also destroyed the valve cover. So here we are now with the car with a broken timing cover, a broken valve cover, and they're very difficult to find in the junkyard. Luckily, there was one in the junkyard. My girlfriend took a look at one of the different junkyards, and we discovered that they had just recently gotten one like 2 days ago. So 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon, loaded the toolbox, got in the car, headed to the junkyard, and got the valve cover and the timing cover pulled off. Got home by about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and basically started getting everything back together and prepping it. And by 9:30 that night, we had a replacement cover and everything taken care of. Retorqued the cam sprocket bolt with some Loctite, checked the other one, they were good after that. The timing cover had a small bump on the outside of it, and after we put the cover on, we noticed that it was cracked. So at that point, I ripped the cover off yet again, and what I discovered is on the second tensioner is a stud that goes into the cylinder head, and when I removed the bolt, it actually backed out that stud probably 2 or 3 turns, and it was just enough so that when you put the cover on, it didn't sit flat, and it actually, once you've tightened the bolts down, pushes that stud through the cover, cracks that bump, your valve cover, your timing cover is shot. So now we're back to where we were with a cracked timing cover, but our valve cover was good. So September 11th, once again, got lucky. On September 11th is when we basically discovered what was causing the problem, and I looked at the pre-existing one we had before and noticed the exact same thing. So even if we had gotten it running properly on the first cover, we would have still had to have gone through and taken that all apart and back and whatever. So September 12th, we went to the junkyard. I was able to source yet another timing cover, but this time when I brought it home, I had already known about the stud, so I had already put that back in, but I threw a little bit of grease on it just to witness mark it. And what I noticed immediately was on the previous covers, when we stuck it on the side of the block, instead of, it would sort of arch back, and so we were using the timing cover bolts to pull it in, but what that was doing at the previous time, it was just causing that stud to literally just force itself out the hole. What I noticed on the second cover was that because that stud was now all the way in, the cover actually went on and actually sat flush all the way around the flange. So I immediately knew that this cover was going to work better and we weren't going to have any issues. So basically from there, it was just rip everything, or just basically gun it and just get everything put back together. And then by the 13th of September, we started the car, had no issues, and she took the first drive around the neighborhood without any issues. And she did that yet again on the 14th. Just, you know, get it out and about, run around and see what was going to happen. No issues, so we called it good. And at that point, the car was running perfectly fine. What happened then on the 15th is I went to move the car and the fuel line was leaking. So we had to go back to the junkyard again and get that. Overall, you know, a lot of people will ask, is this, do you feel like this was something worth doing? If it was going to be in a shop, probably not. You know, a shop probably could have got it done faster, but when you start factoring labor and parts, we're probably close to something like $1,100, $1,200 in parts just alone. And that's not including, you know, like fluids and brake clean and rigs and all the other knickknacks and everything else in there. But, you know, if you were to take this to a shop, you're probably going to be looking at least another $2,000 on top of it, if not more, for the labor and all the work that they would have to do. So doing it myself saved a tremendous amount of money. The car runs fine, it runs great. She's still driving around, you know, she took it to work, didn't have any problems with it. And everything's been good. A lot of people think I'll be crazy for doing this, but that's a car that she really enjoys driving, you know, and when someone enjoys driving a vehicle, you kind of go that extra mile to make sure that it will work and that everything will run and everything can be taken care of. You know, it's a car from 2008. It's not going to be perfect, but we want to try and make it as perfect as we can for her. I learned a lot. There was a lot of stuff that I've learned. There was a lot of things that I learned that I can do differently. You know, a lot of people said you can't do the timings, you can't take the timing cover off in this, and I found out you can. One caveat is the stud to hold the idler pulley apparently goes into a water jacket. So, you know, if you want to take that apart, you got to drain some coolant or get a little bit of leak or whatever it is. But, you know, at the end of the day, I learned a lot. And, you know, if you can learn something and make yourself better, then, you know, great. You know, that's what we're here for. So I'm glad that the car didn't have to be salvaged. She could just, you know, we were able to save the car. She was able to drive the car and she's good with it. She hasn't had best of luck with vehicles in the past, and she was super excited to get this one, and I want her to remain super excited to drive this one, and that's where we're at. So, so yeah, it's a little bit of a different ending for this video. Not usually how I want to end them off, but felt that this one was going to be a little bit different, give you a little bit of backstory. Hopefully you learned something. If you've got any questions, or, you know, you've seen something, or you got a tip or a trick or something that can, you know, make this better, then, you know, let me know. I'll be willing to give you guys a hand or let you guys know where I had troubles or things that I had problems with. So for now, this one's done. I got my shop back, it's empty. I can start working on other projects. I had someone ask me if I got the Camaro still sitting there. It became a giant shelf, and, you know, I realized I got 2 bays here, but I got no lights on that side because I got to get the car out so I can wire some lights in. But yeah, more stuff will be coming. I realized it was a little while for this one to come out, but it was a little bit of work to do for this, and I really wanted to stay focused on it and get it done. So thanks for the time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.